So, ladies and gentlemen, coming right off the back of The Flash, wow, this was a good episode, and I swear that Superman and Lois is more or less the lifeblood of the CW right now. How's it going, my fellow Kryptonians? It feels so good to welcome you back to a brand new Superman and Lois breakdown, review, recap, all that good stuff. And this is for episode 6. And wow, what a brilliant episode. And as I said in that intro, you know, I don't know if you watched The Flash, I've done a review, and yet again, it wasn't much of a positive one. Going into this, it was like a breath of fresh air. I'm not trying to exaggerate at all. If you watch both the shows, you probably know what I mean. And I know Stargirl is really good as well, don't get me wrong, but as of right now, Superman and Lois is just so strong. Absolutely fantastic episode. I can't wait to get into all the details and speculate and just break everything down. So go ahead and like this video if you do go on to enjoy it. I want to say thank you to all my patrons for supporting the channel. They're appearing on screen, but without further ado, guys, let's get into episode 6, and of course, I need to hear your comments down in the comment section below. So this episode picked up right where we left off as of, well, I was about to say last week, but it was quite a while ago now because we went on a huge break, but we had Jordan running away from Tag, and he's getting battered by him. I mean, Jesus, if he wasn't who he is, I'm pretty sure his head would have gone clean off his body because that's a super strength punch. Oh man, it would have spun 360 or something like that. Tag is furious at what's happening to him. I mean, sure, in one way you could be like, why wouldn't you want superpowers? But you have to remind yourself that Tag is just like glitching out everywhere. It's kind of destroying everything that his life was. So I completely sympathize with the confusion, and the only link he has is that video, which is Jordan's heat vision, somehow in his mind obviously contributing to his creation of the powers as well. I thought it was just a great opening sequence here because we had Superman arriving after the beacon, and just the music. I love the music on this show. It just gives you such a sense of urgency. I mean, obviously they put the right score to the right scene. I've mentioned this before so much about the score. I just love it, and this is where things get even crazier. I think my jaw dropped twice in this episode, and I'm not exaggerating there. I think you probably know what moment I'm on about later, but I was like, and I had to rewind quite a few times. But this is where he derails the train, and we get a slow-mo of Superman doing his shite to save the train, and it was just incredible. Maybe I wouldn't, I mean, this is great, but maybe I just feel like I wouldn't view this as incredibly, because this is the kind of quality we should be getting from superhero shows these days. It's just that I'm seeing abysmal episodes from The Flash, so when I step into this veil, it just feels like heaven compared to life on Earth or hell or something. Okay, that's a bit too harsh, but trust me, you'll get what I mean if you just look at the other shows on, well, I can't speak for every show on the CW, but bottom line, the difference is a stark contrast. Now, at this moment, Clark says that Jordan's abilities are evolving because obviously he got many bruises from that interaction with Tag, and he can heal faster, but he can still get hurt. The thing is, didn't Jor-El say that, like, it was just like a temporary blip, the heat vision, and, like, other than that, it's nothing? The radiation in his cells just won't really resaturate as they do with the same with Superman, so that was just, like, some that he dispersed. But so, why would his abilities evolve? So I don't know if I'm kind of misconstruing something there, but I feel like the show so far has said, at least as far as we're aware, the abilities are nothing that are going to develop, even though we all know they're going to develop, and oh man, do they develop. But that's just something I thought I would bring up. Maybe you guys can talk about that. It's not a major criticism, it's just something I thought of as of when that was happening. At this moment as well, we get some seeds set up for later because Jordan also reveals that Tag knows something is up with Jordan, and that obviously could threaten to expose the Kent family. Now, Lois wants to investigate the mines. If you watched my trailer breakdown recently, I've been waiting for this moment because in the trailer it showed that Lois and Captain Luther go in there, so I was really looking forward to that moment, and it went much better than what I thought it was with all of those scenes by the end of this episode. But Clark can't really go there because they're lined with lead. I feel like the ball is really rolling now more than ever. Like, I found all the prior episodes to this like pretty decent, but now I feel like the quality is just really going up and up as we're going through, but that's kind of natural at the same time, because I feel like the premise and story that they've got is just reaching a point of the precipice where they really are going to tackle Edge. There's a lot of tension between General Lane and Superman. There's lots of things going on. The powers are increasing. I love what's going on right now. Morgan Edge is giving people Kryptonian powers, and at the same time is this armored lunatic. So Lois might think, or kind of has a speculation that could Morgan Edge be Captain Luthor in a suit. She's quite far away, but by the end of the episode, she's really starting to get suspicious of Mr. Luthor, shall we say. And I can't wait for that to come out as well, because we also saw in the trailer them sitting at a diner, and Mr. Luthor is explaining the Superman situation on his Earth to Lois. So I can't wait for that to happen. As Clark said, Jordan's powers really are evolving, because, I mean, he's keeping it secret, but when Jonathan was scraping his fork in the fruit bowl, his hearing picks it up 1,000-fold, and that really hurts. As you can imagine, this is very reminiscent of what we've seen from Superman himself in many different iterations when his powers start bleeding through. And this could obviously really spell some disaster, because, hey, they have a football game against Metropolis, and this is a big game because obviously that's the school where they came from, so I was looking forward to that, especially with Jordan glitching out at the minute. Now, moving over to Morgan Edge, at this point he's now putting the people to work. We have Sarah and Carl Cushing talking to Morgan Edge, and he praises Carl's advocacy, and this is when he proposes that Smallville needs a strong leader, and he's kind of looking at Carl as he said that, but yeah, Lana. I feel bad for Carl, I honestly do. He's literally bowing at this guy's feet, and he's not getting any recognition. And I also love how Lois and Captain Luthor are floating around in the background. We'll talk a little bit more about that later. But this starts an interesting story for the Cushings, because obviously Lana gets a promotion. And as I said before in previous reviews, I didn't think I cared too much for the Lang family. I obviously was very interested in Lana Lang, but I'm really enjoying them a lot more than what I thought I would, especially with the motivations behind Kyle and wanting to help the community more and more. That gets even more concentrated in this episode. Now, as we continue along the path with both brothers, Jonathan slaps the locker shut. Well, it does it pretty normally, but yet again, that really spikes Jordan's hearing. And then, lo and behold, the school bell. So this starts to send him into another meltdown, as they say. And in this moment, all I can say is, Jonathan, man, Jonathan, you're such a good brother. He's always trying to help him out. And in this episode, we'll get to it, but yet again, Jonathan is in the mud all the time. And now, I notice, just to put this opinion out there, because I don't think we've discussed this in a while, you know, both brothers, what do we think of them now? Now, I do understand, at some points, Jordan seemed almost a bit annoying to some people with the quote-unquote whininess that a lot of people are talking about in the comment sections and stuff. And trust me, I do get it. I feel like that's almost deliberate at a part, but I really do like both characters now. Don't get me wrong, there are some points where it's like, see sense, kid, what your father is saying makes sense, but that's the whole point. This is the family dynamic. A superpowered family isn't exactly, it's unprecedented. So when you explore it with the Superman family, I feel like they made some very, very good examples of what that would be like in this episode, and we'll talk about that in a little bit. But yeah, I feel like Jordan is chilling out a teeny bit, or whilst he isn't on one side, and as I said, we'll get to that, but yeah, I really like both characters, and, you know, I've always liked Jonathan a lot better, but now, yeah, man, there were some really good scenes with both brothers in this episode. Now, back to the Cushings. We have Lois arrive at the door. She tries to appeal to them about the mine and getting into it due to Edge being involved in illegal and dangerous activity, which is a very hard sell, especially for Morgan Edge's biggest fan, Kyle. But to be fair, she does pull a pretty cool card, like, you guys know I know Superman, and he's looking into it as well, which is a pretty smart move, because it's like, if Superman's looking into it, well, maybe there is something up, but that doesn't quite sway them. Carl is really against this, tensions get raised, and to be honest, I don't find it remotely annoying, because it makes sense for Carl. He points out just then that he got off the phone with a buddy who hadn't worked in 8 months, and he's got mouths to feed, and right now, Edge is giving a chance for his family to survive, and the Cushings see this as their chance to help. Now, this next scene was really awesome. We have Clark taking the boys to the barn for some training, says that your grandpa, good old Jonathan Kent, used this as a way to help him control his strength, and we see like an old punching block, like a massive wooden log, and we see previous punches from a younger, much younger Superman, and so we see Jordan punch the log, and it really hurts. But then we have Jonathan helping him out, and the powers kind of come out a bit more with emotion, saying, imagine that's Cutter's face, one of the Metropolis guys. And in this moment, I love Tyler Hoechlin as Superman. I'm just so glad I've been advocating for him since day one, because I've always seen his Clark Kent, which is really, really good. He plays such a good Clark Kent, and we've seen his little nerd outs, if you will, like at football games, and I loved seeing that. And in this moment, Clark is so happy when he makes that dent. He's like, wow, line it up again, and it's just, I love that. It was such a moment for this super-powered family that, you know, hopefully that is the end goal. Things like that all the time, but obviously it's not as smooth sailing as that. But yeah, it just, I don't know, in this moment, it was nice to see, but also it just reminds me of how much I really like the casting for Superman. And I know that sounds, you know, iffy, just a scene like that, and he's not even in Superman mode, but trust me, there were, as you all know, so many good Superman moments this episode, but that was a really good Dad Clark moment. Now, we have General Lane a little bit in this episode, and I thought they were going to include a scene later that really instilled Captain Luthor's warning to General Lane and fear of Superman even more, but they didn't do it, and I'll talk a bit more about that later, obviously, but for the time being, he rings Clark saying that Tag has been spotted in Metropolis, which is kind of sketchy because that's where the boys' game will be held tomorrow. But in General Lane's words, he says, we have a plan to put this monster back in his cage. And Clark says, he's not a monster, Sam, he's a kid. He's scared. And to be honest, that just kind of says it all, really. And the interesting thing about General Lane is, from a very, very, like, if I'm being brutally blunt here, like, not that I agree with it, from a military standpoint, he doesn't do all that much wrong. I mean, when we're realistically talking about this, that is kind of how, with the things that he does, how things operate. You know, when there's a threat, especially, God, if there was a superpowered threat, with what happened later on in the episode, it isn't all too surprising with the way that was executed. But obviously, I love how they offer both perspectives of, you know, needing to not jump to that conclusion and, you know, try and reach out to the kid. But but with the way General Lane sees it, it's like, you know, my job is to protect the people of this country and Metropolis at any cost. So, like, I like how you see both sides. Sure, it's easy to think, General Lane, you also, like, you're wrong, but you know, compare that to kind of real life ops, if you will, and stuff. It wouldn't go all that different, and it's very interesting to see Superman getting involved in a situation just like that. I just feel like this show is really utilizing and just capitalizing on so many interesting scenarios. At this moment, Sarah offers to, you know, babysit so parents can go out for a nice romantic meal to celebrate the promotion, which means she would not go to the game, and this leads to Tag turning up the door. So yeah, this was gonna get interesting, but let's move on to the high school game. So this is where stuff really gets interesting, and yeah, that was a really good scene in this. Jonathan, I'm really glad that he got a chance to be a quarterback. I mean, the coach is such a douche, I have to be honest. I know coaches can be, you know, both ways, and I'm sure people have experienced that in real life, but he's like, we haven't got a quarterback, Kent. Quarterback? Bastard. But regardless, we now have both brothers on the field, and this is when Jordan, like, blocks Cutter, I believe, sends him flying a bit, and he stands over him. Clark immediately, like, he was happy, but when he knew that his son was kind of flexing over him, he knew what it was really about, which he doesn't want his son to, like, use his powers for that. That is the complete opposite. Fair enough if, yeah, you got a bit more of an advantage over the other players, but if you're doing that to kind of not Hulk out, but, like, kind of intimidate them, then it just goes against everything that Clark is trying to teach him. So he says, rein it in. And I liked seeing that kind of parent conviction from Tyler Hoechlin that he puts into that moment. And in this moment, despite that, I felt really sorry for Jordan, because we can't forget the context of how he was beat all the time when he was a kid. Not only that, his own brother was friends with these bullies, which is a lot to, you know, swallow. It really is. And in this moment, he's getting completely kicked in. I mean, he could have literally have hulked out and they would have all gone flying. He had better sense than that in that moment. And if anyone even has remote anger issues, you know, in a moment of blind rage, it is insanely hard to, you know, keep your emotions under control. So I really feel like everything they're doing right now is pretty airtight, and given the scenarios and situations and all kind of factors that are playing into this, he managed to hold off. But obviously the heat vision is kind of an outlet for anger. I guess you could kind of look at it as almost like an impulsive punch of the wall that sometimes, you know, people do. I think almost probably most people have done something like that. So he needed to release it, and I love that moment when Clark came across on the field. You know, he's screaming, he's crying, he says, I can't hold it in, and he lets his heat vision out because he says, let it out right now, and he does. And it was just a really emotional scene. The music, as I always say, he's crying and screaming as, you know, it's going into Clark's hands. Heat vision is hurting Clark. It was just like it was a touching moment. But a really bizarre moment that you wouldn't necessarily think is touching. This is what I mean. They've really got a very good cocktail going on here. Now, Clark in this moment stresses how dangerous that could have been, and this is more family, super family dynamic going on, which I appreciate. It's interesting to see all perspectives. You know, he asks were there any symptoms and signs that could have made you think this was coming. He tries to deny it, but Jonathan did the right move. He kind of grasses, but like, you kind of have to in that situation because we're not playing around here. Like, you could kill people inadvertently to him. And they mention a migraine at school, says it didn't tell him. And this is fascinating because I think this really does personify a lot of teenage relationships with their parents in certain arguments over times. I think we've all been there. You know what they're saying is right, or you might not even be able to see what they're saying is right. So, for example, he mentioned the migraine at school, and Clark's like, you didn't tell me, and he's just like, yeah, because you would have stopped me from playing the game. And Clark says, yeah, and I would have been right. And he would have been, because that could lead to death. Oh, and lo and behold, what actually happened? And he's just like, I'm supposed to be punished for something that isn't my fault? That's not punishment, Jordan. That's keeping other people safe. If you looked at it really, like, objectively, it's like, that's not punishment. It's just, if you're getting symptoms, you shouldn't go to a game. That's not punishment. That's avoiding something dangerous, but you can't see that because he's a kid, and obviously he's wanting something so bad. He wants to fit in, and they actually even use a line like that. He's saying, I wanted to be good at something, and Clark says, that's not what your powers are intended for, or something like that. I just thought that was a brilliant scene of, you know, bringing something like the Kent family, you know, having kids, Superman having kids, into live action. It was very good. And also bringing in the fact that, I mean, this is the whole premise of the show, right? And I think they're nailing it. Now, moving back to Sarah, Tag says, you've always been my friend. He starts glitching out. The kind of phasey kind of vibrations break the door off its hinges, and that kind of, I think, sent Sarah flying back. She gets knocked out, and they go to Metropolis. Now, Lana and Carl get home, and they realize Sarah isn't there, which is when Sarah wakes up with Tag, and he explains that he can move pretty fast. Now, I appreciate the details of running that fast would literally melt all your shoes. I really do feel like this show, like the writers are going out of their, I don't know if I would say going out their way, but they're doing the right thing. They're giving mini explanations, which normally other shows leave out. And that doesn't necessarily open up plot holes, but it's just kind of left always up to a bit of imagination. But this show is trying to make it, I can appreciate how they're making it airtight, because a lot of times CW shows don't put any effort into doing that. Now we have Superman searching for him in Metropolis, and so Tag shows Sarah the heat vision moment which made him this way, and I was just waiting for that moment all season long. Now obviously she hasn't put it together at all, but I've called it. It's very predictable, but that Sarah would, it's kind of like Smallville, find out about the boys. I'm not saying her parents will or other people, but probably Sarah Lang will be the one to know that the Kents are Kryptonians at some point. I mean, she's already suspicious. She's got the tools now. She hasn't put the dots together. But I guess if you look at that video clip, it's pretty definitive. But regardless, this is a very interesting seed that is only just beginning to sprout, but definitely hasn't grown as of right now. But there was another tease for that right at the end of the episode where Jordan denied it. And she's kind of like, you know, you could kind of tell me if there was something though. And it's like, and she's like, okay. But yeah, I guess that's to be continued. But this is when Superman arrives, and there is so much going on in this episode at the same time at this point, and I loved it. Honestly, I love how they cut all these scenes together, like, simultaneously. And in this review, I'm obviously talking separately about them to make it a bit more cohesive, rather than going from scene to scene to scene. But the music, the tension that was building through several different events unfolding with different quadrants of characters, Lois, Clark, the boys, Sarah, it's crazy. In this moment, obviously, it was very pressing. Clark can hear the DOD coming, and he knows General Lane will not execute this in the most kind of mediative way, if you will. He doesn't care much for this kid, so Superman is adamant about leaving with both of them right now. Anyway, in this moment, the DOD arrive, and they are full out releasing lethal rounds. And Superman literally blocks the DND's bullets and shields Tag, and they release kryptonite-laced bullets. I'm guessing that's why it didn't penetrate, by the way, the skin, just because you would have thought kryptonite bullet would, but I think they're just laced, so I don't think it will necessarily do that much damage as what you think. It was enough to stick in him, but if it was full-on kryptonite, then yeah, I think it would have. And holy crap, you truly see how effing mad Clark is in this moment. His eyes heat up. Instinctually, obviously, he wants to wipe them out. I mean, Clark knows better than that, but, you know, sometimes we feel what we feel, and we keep them in check. Just how this episode is symbolic of that. It also very much so parallels the experience his son is going on in this episode, but obviously the difference being that Clark is an experienced man, an experienced Kryptonian who's lived with these emotions all his life, and it's very much so, as I said, contrasting Jordan in this moment, who can't control his anger, and I love that. I thought this episode was pretty damn well written, and this moment was like, wow, because it obviously gives you that capability for that kind of, as you know, Injustice-esque Superman, or the Captain Luthor's Earth Superman. Obviously Clark knows better than that, but man, that was epic. When he screams, he freaking roars, and he throws the laced kryptonite bullets away and lasers them. It was just so good. He super speeds up to the soldier saying, "Stand down," in a very angry way. I mean, could you imagine how freaking scared you would be if Superman came up to you really fast like that, laser ready eyes, and told you to stand down after you had shot him? Now, I honestly thought that this moment, I thought it would have been a good job, but maybe they just wanted to save it for a better opportunity. I don't know yet, because I haven't seen a future episode of what will make potentially General Lane more worried, but just some constructive criticism here. Maybe it would have been good to have General Lane there, because that would have instilled more believability, I suppose, into Captain Luthor's warning. Because in this moment, you see how angry Superman is. Justifiably so, but General Lane only sees a threat, potentially, when it comes to his daughter's husband. I know that he can see a good side of him, but it's still a threat in his mind, potentially. Now he's been warned about another Earth where he went bad. So I thought this would have been a good moment for him to see the anger of Superman. Despite it being justified, he would have still taken that the wrong way. I mean, I know he was kind of aware of what was going on. Maybe there was a camera, I mean, because they still spoke in the scene after this. And by the way, I'm reviewing the extended cut after you watch it on the CW.com. They don't show this on the TV. They cut it for the network slots, the time TV slots. So I don't know what scenes were extended. Maybe you don't recognize something I'm talking about. For all I know, the scene where Superman is talking to General Lane at the DOD was cut out, because there's been just as big scenes like that have been cut out from previous episodes. And I also love how Clark reassures Tag. He's like really, you're like saying this is not necessary, and he's making sure that it will get taken care of. But let's go back to the boys. They went to Metropolis. They kind of shouldn't have, but you know, they do. I get it. They're teenagers. Even with that, you know, those powers and the potential danger, you're only a kid, so like you might make that mistake. And the Metropolis guys arrive. This is where stuff goes sideways again. By the way, as I said, all of this is happening at the same time, so that adds for such an entertaining ending to this episode, or like, you know, the climax, if you will, of the episode. And he offers Jordan to punch him like that. Oh my god, can you imagine the temptation? And I don't blame Jordan for giving in, even though it is ridiculously stupid, but this is just exactly what this show is about. That would literally have sent his head. I know Jordan isn't full powers level yet, but that could have still broken his neck or something like that. And in this moment, Jonathan, like, super speeded blocks. Yes, it broke his bones, but yet again, through the kind of will of an action, that's what kind of unlocks their abilities in a sense. Or maybe not, actually. Let me completely take that back. For Jordan, it's kind of emotion. And this actually reminds me of something that Clark said. Don't forget, when they were about to punch the boulder, or when they had for the first attempt and it hurt him, he said, okay, I thought we would just summon it by will, but, you know, and that's when he tried emotion. However, for Jonathan, it seemed to be more through will rather than an outlet of anger or emotion. So maybe that's how both brothers contrast. And, you know, we will have Jonathan be the kind of Superboy we know eventually. And maybe Jordan will go down a little bit of a darker path. But I do, you know, if I do say so myself, I think that's kind of a cool assessment. I don't know. I don't know if you have to think that's kind of deliberate. I like to think that Jonathan did that out of a will kind of moment. But I'm so happy to see that Jonathan must have molecularly kind of mutated or unlocked the radiation in his cells in that moment out of an instinctual kind of will reaction to not let his brother frickin' murder a Metropolis bully. Now in this moment, Superman rushes off because he knows that Jonathan is hurt. I think Jordan called out to him. But let's move on to the Captain Luthor stuff, because I saved this part as well for this part to just kind of separate it a little bit. So we have Captain Luthor arriving at Lois's, and oh wow, I was like, okay, what's going to happen now? He brings 2 badges, Lois is getting suspicious, and they go to the site. As I said earlier, they get in, and Captain Luthor managed to also get the schematics. It's like, this dude, how is he coming up with all of this stuff? And Lois is very, very sus of him. The music, yet again, so good, loved all of that. And so they find X-Kryptonite, and the story is what is in these walls, Captain Luthor says, and he also calls it XK. Now that is interesting because he already knows about it, but it seems that on this Earth, that XK or X-Kryptonite hasn't been a thing before, where that had already been probably a thing that had happened in his history and had been discovered. He says it's the rarest form of kryptonite, and if his hunch is right, this mine has the largest supply of it anywhere, which is when Leslie Lara arrives. Now, Lex uses his little laser wand to combat her, and that just makes Lois even more suspicious. She wants answers. I thought all of this was great. I really can't wait for her to find out. She says you are armed to the teeth with the kind of weapons that would put you on the FBI's most wanted list, which is true. She also mentions that the security badge is one of the best forgeries she's ever seen, and she asks who he really is and why he's in Smallville, and he says only for now that he's trying to prevent something really bad from happening, but Lois doesn't get all of her answers because she hears about Jonathan. Now, as I mentioned earlier in the trailer, by the way, check out my trailer breakdown if you haven't seen it already. Maybe not all of you have. I'll leave it linked at the end of this video, but they do have a sit down, and I can't wait for that conversation to happen, because that is when Lois is going to hear about the alternative Clark and Superman, but I'm sure her response will be, but that's not my Superman. But I can't wait for his response, because that's what we've all been thinking about. Why, just because one Superman does it doesn't mean yours will. He's going to have to come up with and the writers must have thought of this, obviously, already, and given a very good reason as to that makes sense, but there's something that will still, in my mind, make that happen, and I'm dying to know what that is, because otherwise it's like, just because that person did it doesn't mean this person will do it. But I'm sure they have a reason. Now, Jonathan is in a cast for the next 6 to 8 weeks. He hasn't, as we kind of went over, I believe he's had that kind of catalyst that will now make him develop powers, but he isn't as far along as his brother, so he doesn't have all the proper healing properties yet. And I feel bad for Jonathan, because yeah, again, this is another scene where his face was in the dirt because of his brother. And obviously this is an understandable situation, but you have to feel for Jonathan. But I was thinking, why aren't they talking about how fast he did it? But I guess when things happen so fast like that, you don't necessarily think that was because you had the super speed, especially when your hand gets broken. So I think he would just write it off as, oh, well, I'm not special or anything, but we actually know as the audience that he is. In this moment, Clark obviously kind of reiterates and raises another good point in how his powers come with responsibility, and I love the following lines. Obviously, I'm not going to read them all out, but he mentions how the anger that he felt today that made him want to use his powers is what feelings he has to deal with all the time as well, and how when he became to Metropolis for the first time, it was very important to get their trust. And he also paralleled it, as this whole episode did in of itself, with how today he had that anger and he chose not to release it, obviously, because he doesn't want to laser a load of soldiers. Now, at the end of the episode, we had Lois and Lana talking. She's now basically got to help her figure out Morgan Edge through her new promotion in a kind of undercover way. So that's going to give the Lang family, or should I say the Cushing family, even more of an interesting role in the show, especially unbeknownst to Kyle. That will add more friction into the relationship, which has already been quite stressed with how they've showed us the context to that in their past, which is going to be very interesting. But obviously Kyle's got to find out that she was right, and obviously all will be well, I'm sure. And then that scene between Jordan and Lois I found really sweet. Like, seriously, I can't remember his name. Jordan, the actor, he's a very good actor. Both brothers are, but like, he's a very good actor. In this scene, I felt very bad for him, but that's when he started fitting. And Clark just grabs him, and it's like heat vision is like leaking from his face and his cheeks. He just races off to the fortress, and as I've kind of mentioned about that trailer, definitely watch my trailer breakdown, because we get a little scene of him being scanned. We see all these little points in his head. Maybe he's manifesting too many abilities at once. I think Jor-El's gonna have something pretty interesting to say about this, but it's quite concerning that almost heat vision was imploding from within. That's not good. It's almost like that guy who heat visioned with his eyes closed. I forget his name. But yeah, cannot wait. What a cliffhanger to end on. So, you know, overall, this episode was great. Is it my favorite? I don't know. It feels like it, at least right now. So, man, Superman and Lois, you just continue to improve how you've curated yourself with quality the way a CW superhero show should. I have no complaints, and I just want to see more of this. Please keep it up. It's doing a great job. I love the cast. I am such a big fan of Elizabeth Tulloch's Lois Lane, Tyler Hoechlin, been there since day one. The kids I've seriously warmed up to, one more than the other one, obviously from the beginning, but I'm seeing lots of comments like that, because obviously Jordan came across a little bit quote-unquote whiny, but like, context, there is context to that. And yeah, I'm having a great time. So I'd love to know your thoughts down in the comments below, everyone. Please go ahead and like this video if you did enjoy it, especially if you got this far. And as always, links will be in the top of my description in the pinned comment, which is my comment. You won't miss it unless you just scroll past it, which a lot of people do, so you shouldn't miss it. But anyway, guys, thank you so much for watching. I hope you all have a lovely rest of your day, and I'll see you fellow Kryptonians in the next video. Goodbye.